So Thursday, this past Thursday, January 20th, the Democrats used the filibuster in the Senate to block sanctions on Russia. Now, I've been following politics closely for over 50 years, and hypocrisy in the United States Senate is nothing new, but I have not seen the level of hypocrisy as I've seen this past year in the last 50 years. So the Democrats literally used the filibuster the same week they called the two Democrats and the 50 Republicans that voted against ending the filibuster racist for supporting the filibuster. You cannot make this up. Literally the same week. And, Saul Alinsky, the famous communist from the 60s, said, always accuse your opponent of what you're doing. Always accuse your enemy of being who you are. And you see this on so many fronts here. And so the filibuster they used was to block the sanctioning of Russia. Allowing Russia to continue building their Nord Stream 2 pipeline, pumping oil from Russia into Germany. Five Democrats in a day when everyone's like, oh, we need bipartisanship. We had 5 Democrats join the 50 Republicans to sanction this. I mean, Ukraine is our friend. They're our ally. Under Obama, the Russians were emboldened because they knew he was weak, and they invaded and took over Crimea. Trump comes in, their plan was to take over the rest of Ukraine, but once Trump came in, they stopped. The minute Biden's in, they're putting troops on the border, and every expert said they're going in. They're going in for the kill. Under Trump, he vetoed, as the leader of NATO, as the most powerful member of NATO, he took leadership first by making everybody pay their fair share. He said, America's not going to carry your load anymore. We're all going to pay our fair share. So NATO started paying more money, and NATO became stronger, and America became more respected amongst NATO allies. But what he told NATO is, no, we're not going to allow this pipeline. Why should we let Russia, who I'm sending my troops into Europe, we have tens of thousands of troops in Europe, I'm giving you guys weapon systems to protect you from the Russians. Why would I allow the Russians to pump oil into Germany and to make a lot of money? Russia's dependent on selling oil. Why would I do that? When America produces more oil, we can sell it. And that was Trump's common sense presidency in a nutshell. And this is why every blue-collar conservative in America loves this guy, because he just made common sense decisions that put America first. Now, Biden immediately came in right after he signed an executive order to cancel a pipeline, the XL pipeline from our closest ally, Canada, into America, canceling like 150,000 projected jobs that it was going to make as the pipeline came down to Texas. Right after he cancels that, because he says it's bad for the environment, although that means we're going to have hundreds of trucks every day polluting the air with diesel fuel, bringing the oil, and the oil's still going to come. It's actually more environmentally sound, but he had to please his base who hates pipelines. So, but if he really cared about the environment, why would he allow this Russian pipeline? I'm going to tell you why in a minute. But they're calling this filibuster, a relic of Jim Crow. And it's kind of ironic on two fronts. Like I said, it's the highest level of hypocrisy. Number one, every Jim Crow law in America, 100%, were installed by Democrats. It was all Democrat cities and Democrat states. The Democrats put the Jim Crow laws in place. And then as far as filibuster, it was in fact the longest filibuster in the United States Senate history was held by the Democrat Party blocking the Civil Rights Acts of 1964. And ironically, one of the senators that did this longest filibuster was Al Gore's father, Al Gore Jr., who was a member of the KKK before he was in the Senate. And Bill Clinton famously said, well, back then, you had to be a member of the KKK to get any leadership position in the Democrat Party. Ironically, Joe Biden's good friend, Robert KKK Byrd, was part of that Democrat filibuster, the longest in Senate history. And you may have heard me say this before, but if not, Robert Byrd was a Grand Colleague in the KKK before the Democrats voted him as House Majority Leader in the 90s. And when he died in 2010, Joe Biden gave his eulogy and said, this guy was my mentor. He was my hero. He was a great American, former KKK leader, not just a member, a leader. And he boasted that he recruited 500 of his racist friends in West Virginia to join the Klan. So this is the Democrat Party. And but why would they not want to sanction Russia? Russia's about to invade. So all we're saying is, we're not going to let you build this pipeline. And that's going to cost them a lot of money. That would be painful. That might give Putin some pause. But instead, they're saying, no, let's give him a chance. If he invades, then we'll put sanctions on him. It's like, how does that even make sense? And the reason is, if you're paying attention, the New York Post exposed the Biden crime family with the emails from Hunter Biden, and they've been authenticated. The FBI has his laptop. They confirmed it's his laptop, and they're investigating Hunter Biden for taking millions and millions and millions of dollars from the Russians as well as the Chinese while his father was vice president. So I think the Russians have our president compromised. And this is why we see such weakness with Russia. And like I said, the left always projects onto their opponent what they are. So for 2 years, the left investigated Trump with Russia collusion, and it came up empty. But what that 2 years of investigation proved was that Hillary Clinton colluded with the Russians to make up this false dossier that caused the Trump campaign and the Trump White House to be surveilled by the FBI. That's a fact. That's not conspiracy. That's all been proven. No one's denying this. And the same thing they did with Russia is the same thing they do with race. They're calling everyone who's against blowing up this filibuster. And when Donald Trump wanted blown up and the Republicans wouldn't give him, and he was mad at the McConnell because he wouldn't get rid of the filibuster, the Democrats were saying how horrible it is that a president would even consider getting rid of the filibuster. So there are differences in parties. The Republicans didn't listen to their president. The Democrats listened to their president to get rid of this filibuster. But luckily, there's two moderate, I would call Manchin a moderate, Kirsten Sinema I would call liberal, but there's two Democrats that have integrity and common sense, and they stood with the Republicans to oppose blowing up the filibuster. But it's ironic they call it racist when every one of the Democrats that were standing for the longest filibuster in the history of the Senate remained Democrats, other than one, Strom Thurmond. He came over to the Republican side and then voted in favor of civil rights. Once he changed his views on civil rights, then he became a Republican. But the Democrats that stayed, they never changed. They never changed. In fact, Joe Biden wasn't there in 1964, but when he came in the 1970s and they wanted to integrate the schools, white and black schools, he was against it. He was against desegregation, and even Kamala Harris called him out on the first debate. basically called him a racist because of what he said. Joe Biden's on record saying he doesn't want to send his kids to a racial jungle. So the racists are calling the non-racist racist. That's what they do. And the complicit media, who are all Democrats, just mouth their words like parrots. None of them bother to tell the truth. And this is why the Democrat Party is saying, look at them, they're racist. Look at them, they're racist because they don't want to blow up the filibuster. Meanwhile, this was the party that was against civil rights. And the only reason they gave up, I think it was like 60 to 70 days, they stood and did a filibuster. Actually, I think they did a talking filibuster saying how terrible this would be for the country. The only reason they gave in was because their president, Lyndon Johnson, famously told them, hey, if we pass this, those N-words will vote Democrat for the next 50 years. And that's why they passed it. But they weren't done persecuting the African Americans in this country. No. Although they started the KKK, they backed another group that's more deadly to the African American population than the KKK ever dreamed to be. Planned Parenthood. Planned Parenthood has killed more African Americans than the KKK would have ever dreamed of. In fact, the founder of Planned Parenthood, Margaret Sanger, said we need to put our clinics in black neighborhoods so we can exterminate the Negro race. And 90% of their clinics are today in black neighborhoods, getting funding from the Democrats, and then in turn, just like the corrupt DC people do, they're bringing the money back in through donations. So it's a deadly circle. And who's paying the price? In New York City, every single year, more black babies are killed than aborted. That's why the black race in America is actually going down, their population side, and the Hispanic race is going up. So these insidious Democrats are saying, we're on their side, we want to get rid of the filibuster so we can put more voting rights in. But their voting rights they want, they want complete government control. They want federal control over all the states. That's not how this country was set up. That's like communism, where the central government controls everything. And there's laws on the books to protect people from discrimination in voting. But what they want to get rid of photo ID. They want, like New York City, to allow non-citizens to vote. They just want to let everybody mail in their ballot without any ID or verification. So it's not voting rights. It's rigging rights. They want to rig. They want to rig the future because they know they're about to get shellacked in November, and they know they're going to get shellacked in 2024. So, although this might seem political to you, this is a spiritual battle. That's why I put it on this channel, not my Rumble channel, because the enemy hates life. And the enemy is getting really mad that, according to political scholar Dr. Francis Beckwith, who I had on last week, Roe v. Wade is about to get overturned, and the left is going bananas, and the demons that feed on the blood of unborn children are getting angry. So this is a spiritual battle. The Bible says we don't battle flesh and blood. We battle spiritual principality in high places. So pray for our country, pray for our leaders, and stay Catholic.